Boom, rank 25. Now let's talk about what worked and what didn't. So hey guys, it's Cole, and patch 6.3 has brought in a brand new PvP season and armor that all jobs can wear, and you know if it's armor for healers then I'm going to be right on that. So considering that I've gone all out grinding in PvP in patch 6.3, I'm going to be sharing a tier list of the best jobs to play and give context as to why I'm placing them in the list. Rather than just kind of hurl them out on there, I think that the context is higher value than just the placement so people can understand why. Disclaimer is play what you want to play, and mastery over your job is more meaningful than just playing a job on a tier list, any tier list. Let's start with the tanks. Warrior is devastating. When I played it, I really felt like a genuine tank, a force of nature that could not be ignored. Warrior can take an extreme amount of focus fire. Even among tanks, it has the highest base HP and fantastic supporting cooldowns. Like all tanks though, it doesn't mean that you're immortal though, but if you can choose through something like the Summoner's Burst cooldowns and those aren't being dropped on your own squishies in your team, then you did good job, ironically. Also, the crowd control on Warrior is just extremely effective. AoE stun, the chain, oh yeah, and the ultimate that removes guard, it is S tier easily. Dark Knight is also extremely brutally excellent. It's S tier as well, but for a very different reason than Warrior. You are extremely sturdy with the Blackest Night and basically all the survivability throughout the entire kit. But the icing on the cake is Eventide, your ultimate, which is an excessively powerful ability. AoE damage up to 24,000 damage. As a tank, that's huge, but then you also can't die for 10 seconds after, which is just ridiculous. But this ult also enables Blood Spiller to do max damage, and obviously that pairs well with Shadowbringer. Plunge also reduces the healing that the targets can have. It's going to be an easy S tier rank for completely different reasons than Warrior. This is a very aggressive, very powerful tank. Gunbreaker is A tier. It's not the same level as Dark Knight and Warrior, but undeniably it is a monster. You deal tons of damage, you can take an enormous amount of punishment, and you are uniquely able to adapt to the current match you're in using Junction that lets you modify parts of your kit. Gunbreaker's ultimate is also extremely powerful. Now see, the Gunbreaker being a tank can survive being in the middle of the enemy team and doing this. If it was say a dancer, you're gonna get slapped, but it's frankly a very powerful ultimate here, and it is available every 60 seconds, which is great. Paladin, I'm torn on. See, taking damage for an ally is awesome, but the problem is if you don't have an ally that knows how to properly leverage it and they're not performing well, it's a throwaway cooldown, or worse yet, will make yourself just combust, which really sucks. Has happened to me, and I was like, oh my god, what? Confetti is a cool cooldown to enable healing. Shield Bash is fine, but it's just not as wild as Warrior's AoE stun. The most significant part of playing Paladin is definitely the ultimate Phalanx, which massively reduces the damage that the team takes and as well makes you completely invulnerable. But because of its long cooldown and the fact that the rest of the kit isn't too amazing, I'm definitely going to put it at high B. But if it wasn't for this ultimate in particular, I would knock Paladin down 2 tiers easily. Now moving on to melee DPS, I'll frankly be honest, PvP melee feels like first class for the most part. Higher base HP, higher damage, and most of them have great mobility and cooldowns to support taking a ton of punishment. Let's start off with the most broken one, Dragoon. It has an extreme amount of damage. Its AoE ultimate is still very tricky for most people to see in the heat of battle, and you can use it to escape bad situations, which is just hilarious. Honestly, just don't use it at obvious times where everyone can look for it. Dragoon's highly mobile. It has high burst outside of its ult, which is huge, and its defensive is totally busted. It's S tier for sure. In fact, I'm going to make a custom tier for Noficus Coconuts. Dragoon is deserving of that title. Now following right behind Dragoon is Monk. It definitely has less damage than Dragoon, straight up saying that. You will not tally up the damage charts, but what Monk does have is extreme tankiness, extremely sticky, making any target kind of saying Monk is melee is kind of pointless because you're glued to the face of anyone that you choose. And probably the best part of Monk is that you are a consistent nightmare to any caster with a mind-blowing amount of crowd control with that stickiness and defensiveness. If you focus on someone on Monk, they are going to basically be unable to play in the match, stick to the enemy, white mage, black mage, or summoner, and laugh as they just cannot function. S tier. Also, I need to second that Riddle of Earth is an extremely outrageously strong defensive. You can take so much damage as a monk and just laugh. Now here's where melee starts to become a lot more fair. Samurai is solid. It's in my mind like a more fair Dragoon, which still puts it in B tier because it's very strong, but the ultimate is far easier to predict. Its mobility is fine, its damage outside of ult is good, but not as insane as Dragoon's. But where it really can shine, especially against teams that don't expect it or are super distracted, is Samurai's ultimate is still able to one-shot entire teams. I just noticed that it was far less potent than previous seasons. I think people now are knowing what to look for. I'm going to put Ninja in C, but I'm going to be putting it into B because it's fine. You can pull off some wild things if they are set up properly, but that's that's often a problem that I faced, that Ninja, unlike Dragoon or Monk, is feeling more on the fair side of things. If your team enables it, yes, your ultimate can go bonkers. Yes, Yosho Ranryu hits like very hard, but the bad thing is you can't spam the same ninjutsu over and over again with that, which kind of sucks. Also, the basic shuriken that is on the GCD feels like it'd be better if it was an off GCD ability. Overall, Ninja is good, but it's definitely more on the fair side of things. Now for Reaper, unfortunately it's getting the D in spite of me not wanting to give it the D. I am very impressed with this baseline kit. You have a solid amount of crowd control, mobility, utility, like using your ultimate also feels great. There's tons of buns to hit and stuff to get out there, which in PvP with limited buns feels amazing, but it feels like it hits like a soggy noodle most of the time until you build a plentiful harvest, which does definitely take a while. I've also felt what I've experienced when Reapers are on me when I played other jobs, that overwhelmingly they just aren't a threat. Like compared to Dragoon, Reaper just feels very much low concern. A Dragoon I will be alarmed about, a Reaper not so much. So give it more damage in general, also maybe a defensive buff during their ultimate Tenebri Illumirum. I feel like I got jumped on as soon as I used that. That brings us to casters, and I'm required to give this general disclaimer for casters, especially for Black Mage and Summoner. If you are allowed to do your own thing and don't have a monk glued to your face, you can do extremely, and I mean truly, amazingly, extremely degenerate, disgusting things. But if there is a Dragoon or Monk on the enemy team that knows what you're up to, you can knock the ranking down 2 tiers because you simply won't be able to play the game. Blunt, but it's the truth. First up is Black Mage, extremely consistent damage, very, very high, extreme consistent damage. Crowd control, if you use ice, is even better. It's heavily nerfed though a few patches ago, so like it's fine. It's not amazing, but it's definitely okay. Be warned that your ultimate is a signal beacon to jump on you, so be ready for that. So I'm giving it an A rank, but remember, Monk on top of you smacks you right down to C. Sounds like an exaggeration? Trust me, it's not. Good Monk will make you cry on Black Mage. Summoner is also extremely high damage, but rather than being consistently high, your damage is focused on massively painful bursty spikes of damage. Your burst potential is outrageous, and if you identify weak target and have cooldowns up, they are screwed. Also, your ultimate is by far some of the best AoE burst in game. You also have the option to be more mobile and defensive using Phoenix as your ultimate rather than Bahamut, but be aware Bahamut does have cast times, which frankly between Black Mage and Summoner, with the amount of monks that have stuck to my face, I've always found it easier to exist and function on Summoner than Black Mage, so placing Summoner high A tier, only dropping to B tier if there is a monk. Definitely better than Black Mage if there's a monk. Red Mage is fantastic in certain situations, but my experience has largely been worse than Black Mage and Summoner. I'd say that's at the top of B tier-ish. Yes, Silence is great. Yes, their ultimate when used properly can hit hard in AoE, but if you're in melee, you will likely get very hurt. You've also traded off a lot of damage potential for utilities. When certain situations that use those utilities, you can be very effective, but I definitely felt more team dependent on Red Mage than Summoner or Black Mage. I just can't see it being higher than B tier given what I've experienced, unfortunately. At physical ranged, I have been both impressed and unimpressed with how physical range have performed. Playing Dragoon and Black Mage and Summoner, I feel like in general so much less impactful as a role as a whole. Machinist is definitely A tier because it has so much of a single target punch. Your potential with critical hit drill combos or your ultimate is extreme. Anything with low HP should be very concerned that you exist, but it can be extremely cheesed with barriers, so timing is everything with that ultimate. Not to mention that the Bioblaster skill is The turret can also be annoying in team fights for persistent damage, and the shield is handy utility, so I would say Machinist is A tier. It is in a weird position. I think it counters Dragoon particularly well. The Silence and Root are very effective. The ultimate also gives your team ultimate charge that is absolutely great. You also enable the team with a lot of damage buffs. I feel like I get the most consistent damage off on Bard of any ranged class, just consistent, not really bursty, but the Bard does not have the damage potential of Summoner or Black Mage or Dragoon, so you are left largely dependent on the team to perform. You can't really make up for anyone who's not performing, but if you're part of a team with a skill level, your timings on silences, roots, and the rest will definitely impact it. Putting it lower A tier, but if you're on a bad team, well, let's make its own tier. Dancer's a job I want to like. Yes, mobility is nice. Yet the ultimate crowd control is nice, but it is so much harder to get damage off on Dancer than other jobs. Dance Partner also doesn't feel great in PvP because you can't really spike in coordinate. Maybe Dancer would be better if pre-made parties were a thing, but it'd be, how to say it, I'm just playing Dancer in D tier. I'm so sorry. So the fact that you need to go into the middle of the enemy team as a Dancer rather than like with Warrior or Gunbreaker's cooldowns, you just get slapped. Healers in general, they aren't bad, but as a whole they feel tremendously squishy. I felt far squishier on healers than anything else in the game. White Mage is definitely S tier. I noticed that the damage White Mages do feels significantly lower than what I remember it being. It won't pump at the end screen, but you definitely are impactful. Things like your ultimate, things like your polymorph stun, things like combining that with a Flatus as well as charging in. You're really the combo and enable a lot with White Mage. Very easy S tier. That ultimate is just so good. Astrologian is very team dependent just because it has so many buffs, and it does feel far weaker than the other healers, especially if your team isn't performing well. If you're on a really good team, it feels like a win more button, but if you're not on a winning team, it doesn't feel as impactful. So Astro is like the definition of, hey, win more, but win more doesn't win losing games, I found. Louis Root sounds great, but it's not enough to save you from Monk. Microcosmos is great, but it's again not enough to save the team. Compared to like White Mage, it's just like I don't feel like I'm enabling too much. Scholar's next is lower B tier. I find Scholar capable of disgusting amounts of pressure, consistent horrendous amounts of pressure, but the burst feels more impactful than consistent pressure in PvP in 14. Buff up the damage over time effect and let it rip. It'll chunk. You will definitely be able to top the damage meters at the end of the screen. You are also lowering incoming damage doing that, which you also can buff your allies' damage too, so you're tilting things in your team's favor. Alongside that, Seraph is undeniably the single most powerful defensive skill in PvP. Mummification is also the best counter to people trying to stagger and delay the point ever. Mummification is amazing. Denying healing, very strong. Also super short range, so compare this to like Warrior, Dragoon, Summoner, Black Mage, White Mage. It's just not good enough. It's definitely fantastic on paper, but it's not adding up in patch 6.3. We're ending it on Sage, and I'm putting it at the top of C tier. Sage has a disturbing amount of damage that can pump out, especially given that it essentially throws at a Zenyatta Discord orb on the entire enemy team, amplifying everyone's damage done to everyone quite consistently. Unlike Astro, yes, this is a win more button, this is objectively a buff, but I felt a lot more independently powerful on Sage than Astro. Also, you have tons of AoE damage, tons of mobility. The ultimate is also pretty solid, but its recharge time is very, and I mean very long, so I'm putting it in Beard here as well, with a disclaimer that going into melee as Sage is still extremely risky. If your team doesn't allow you and like doesn't follow up, you will be folded like a lawn chair and slapped. Anyhow, with that, I am sadly over time of this video. I hope that this information helps you all and that you enjoy PvP. Anyhow, if you like this video and want to help support me, I would super appreciate if you dropped a beautiful crystal rank on that like button and can't die that subscribe button. Take care, everyone.